Hello, Internet. Welcome to Secondhand Bootcamp. Today, I'm going to talk to you about how you can improve your input forms. I'm going to show you how you can go from this to this. Let's do this. When I was in my bootcamp, my instructors had a lot of hot tips. Keep your code dry, talk to a rubber duck, go outside and touch grass. But today, we're going to talk about something else. Styling your inputs. Seriously, the amount of people at my bootcamp who would just change the background color and call it a day was staggering. We can do better. Our goal is to create the illusion that our placeholder text is moving from the placeholder to above the input, similar to how Material UI styles theirs. We're going to start with a new React app. I'm using Vite. Feel free to correct me down below. And I've already installed Tailwind CSS, removed our app.css file, added a background image, and I've already cleared out our app.jsx file. Now let's create a new component folder called login form. And inside there, we'll add in the new component called loginform.jsx. And now we're going to stub it up. You can type this all out, or you can simply type sfc, add in the title, form, tab over twice, and give it a couple tags, starting with main, a div, and let's add in an h1, and let's test this out by just writing a login form page. Now, let's head back over to our app file and import that at the top. Import login. And let's add that inside of our div. And if all goes correct, we should see login form page at the top. Perfect. Now let's head back into our login form and start adding a few more elements. First, let's add in an image. And let's add in this image from my Twitter account. Secondhand Bootcamp, if you're not already following. Next, let's change our H1 to something you'd expect on a login page, like welcome back. And now we can start giving a few more elements that we'll need in our form. Starting with form. We won't worry about the action for now, since we're not actually submitting this. Now let's add in a div input here. We're going to leave type text for our first one, as we want to be able to see what we're typing. Let's adjust this slightly so it's a little easier to read as we add in more elements. So let's add in name, email, and let's turn off autocomplete. And let's actually add that placeholder that came up. That way we can see what we're trying to replicate. Next, let's add in a label. And make sure you add in the same name as the name on the input. So email. And then we're just going to add email to the label. And we're going to duplicate all of this inside the div and just adjust this for our password. Word. And we're going to remove the capitalization from a couple places here. And then make sure you change the type to password as well. Now, if you have any nosy neighbors who are looking over your shoulder, they won't be able to see what you're typing, as opposed to the email. The form's looking pretty good now, but we do need a button so we can submit this. Now we can get into our styling. The form's looking not quite great yet, but don't worry, we're gonna fix that. Tailwind allows us to apply our CSS directly in the JSX element, but if you plan on using multiple forms that look similar, you may want to create classes in our index.css file, but we'll cover that in a different video. Let's adjust our main tags here to center everything. We're going to add flex column, and items center. And let's also add a margin top of 5 to help space this out. Next, in our div, we're going to add in our background color, which is going to be gray 50, flex column. We're going to make the width 40% of the view page. We're going to make this rounded. Add in some margin of 4. Add in a custom height of 450 pixels. justify center, item center, gap of 4, and let's give it a shadow of large. Already this is looking a lot better, but it looks like our logo is a little too big. Let's adjust that. And add a class name and give this a width of 100 pixels. And let's give this rounded full, that way it's a perfect circle. Next, let's move over to our H1 and give a similar change, that way it stands out as our title. Let's give a text of 2XL, font bold, and let's give it a margin bottom of 2. Now we can start styling the form itself. Let's add a class name here and give it flex column, and a gap of 8. Now on our div, we're going to add a class of relative. We're adding a class of relative here, so when we position our label, it will always be positioned according to the parent element, no matter the size of the screen. Now it's time to style the inputs. Add a class name, padding of 2, text small, width 200 pixels, background slate 50, a border bottom of 2, and border yellow 300. Now let's add some focus properties here. Focus allows us to have different classes active when we're focused on the input element, either by clicking or tabbing into the field. First, we're going to add focus outline none, and a focus border yellow 500. And don't forget, you're going to want to add in a transition here of colors and set the duration to 300 milliseconds. Now that when we select the input, the color changes slightly to indicate where we're selecting. You can use whatever colors you want, but I think the yellow fits the theme nicely. The goal is actually to not have the user notice the change. It's a slight indication that they'll subconsciously see, but you don't want the jarring effect of changing colors instantly. Plus, this gives it a nice modern look that's a little better than the 90s style box that we're all used to. Let's work on fixing up the label now. First, we're going to add a class name of absolute. We're also going to add in top of 1 and left of 2. And now you can see the label is almost perfectly covering the placeholder text. It's not 100% the same, and if you want to use custom pixels, you can, but I'm happy with it. Now let's delete our placeholder text since it's no longer needed. And now it looks like the label has become our placeholder text. Let's do the same on our password. We're going to copy over the class name, give that to the input, and then we're going to copy over the class name for our label. And you notice the password moved to the top left. That's because we forgot to give a class of relative to the div. There we go. Now let's remove the placeholder text. Before we continue with the CSS, we have to add a few more elements to our component, starting with useState. We're going to scroll to the top of the page and import it at the very beginning. Inside of our login form, we're going to type out const form data, set form data, then assign it to useState, and then we're going to add in email with a blank string and do the same for password. And then we're going to close that out. Next, let's add in a function for our handle change. And you can see this is going to pop up because I use this quite frequently. And the last thing we're going to do is deconstruct our form data. That way we don't have to use dot notation every time we want to access these. So email, password, assign it to form data. Next, we're going to want to add in the on change and the value to our inputs. So we'll come down here, add value, and we'll add on change. And we're going to do the same thing on our password. We're almost done. In fact, looking at the form, it looks correct. Except if you start typing, you'll notice quickly something's wrong. Our label is covering our text, We need to fix that. Let's add a class of peer to each of our inputs. This will allow us to use the state of the input to dictate characteristics of the label. Speaking of the label, let's add a few more properties there. Let's add peer focus of negative top 3, a peer focus text small, and let's add a peer focus text gray 600. And don't forget to add a transition all here as well. Looking back at our form, we can see when we select the form, it moves correctly into place. But if we start typing and direct our attention away, it's going to revert back. So we need to add a couple more things here. We're going to change our class name of label to a ternary statement. Add an object, backticks, and we're going to remove our quotation marks from the outside. Next, we're going to add in the value that we're going to be checking, followed by a question mark. So email, question mark, and then we're going to add a couple of quotation marks, followed by a colon, followed by a couple of quotation marks. So now we're going to add in the values that we want to have present when email is truthy, followed by falsy. So let's add in negative top 3, text small, and text gray 400. And I'm going to leave the falsy values blank, as I don't think it needs any, but feel free to add your own and play around with any custom styles. Now let's test this. We're going to select, type in secondhand at bootcamp.com. And if we tap away, we should see the email remain exactly where it is. Amazing. We also added a slight transition to a lighter color to help give the effect that you're no longer selecting that input as well. Let's do the same thing on password here. And don't forget to update the value to password as well. Now, this video was all about form inputs, but there's no way I could leave a button looking this sad. So let's add a couple styles to that. I want to give it a class name. I'm going to give it a width of 200 pixels, a background of red 100, padding 2, rounded medium, a hover of background red 400. We're going to do a hover text late 50, and we're going to transition all, shadow medium, and add a focus outline of yellow 500. Now when we hover over the button, we can see it changes color slightly, and if we tab over it, it has color similar to our form outline here. And perfect, we're done. Except not quite yet. I lied, there's one more step that we need to do, something that would drive your users absolutely mad if you left out. Although it looks like the form works correctly, if you were to select the email, you notice that you can't actually click into the form yet. You end up highlighting the label without being able to type. Something that would drive me absolutely mad. But don't worry, it's a quick fix. All we're going to do is go back to our input and copy the name password value and just update the name ID. It's that simple. And that's it. Now we can go back to our form, click on the label, and start typing away. Now that's a good looking form. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to leave a comment down below. Is there anything else you would change? Anything I missed? Also, let me know what you want to see covered in our next video, and don't forget to subscribe to see more tips and tricks. Thanks for watching. See you guys next time.